Hi, I'm Shirley Reece-Hughes, Curator of Painting, Sculpture, and Works on Paper here at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. I'm also the curator of The World Outside, Louise Nevelson at Midcentury. This exhibition explores 40 years of Nevelson's groundbreaking 2- and 3-dimensional art. Visitors will see drawings, etchings, lithographs, sculptures dating from the late 1930s to the 1970s, revealing how Nevelson innovated different media. The exhibition is divided into 5 thematic sections. The choreographer section explores Nevelson's over 20-year study of modern dance and how that influenced her work. The visionary section recreates one of Nevelson's first immersive installations, so visitors will have an understanding of how Nevelson wanted viewers to interact with her work. The community builder section looks at how Nevelson was one of the first artists to consider visitors' participations within the work and wanting to dissolve boundaries between art and the viewer. The printmaker section looks at how Nevelson was truly innovative, particularly in her lithographs, incorporating everyday materials in the same way that she did with her sculptures. In the environmentalist section, visitors will have an opportunity to explore how Nevelson was attuned to her surroundings and her interest in vital resources, and how that impacted her art and her vision. Born Leah Berlowski, Louise Nevelson immigrated with her family from Ukraine around 1903 to escape religious persecution. The family settled in Rockland, Maine, where Nevelson grew up. There she graduated high school around 1918, and by 1920 was married to Charles Nevelson, a shipping magnate. 2 years later, she'd had her first child. But Nevelson wanted to pursue a career in art, and it was something that her husband was not supportive of. So by 1931, Nevelson had divorced and sought out on her own a career. In the 1930s, one of Nevelson's first modes of working was drawing. She didn't have a lot of economic resources, so drawing on paper was a way for her to find herself. These early drawings are represented in the show, and they show her very intuitive, spontaneous approach that she ends up using in building her wall sculptures. Nevelson reimagined sculpture in the post-war era. Unlike her contemporaries who were focused on welded metal sculpture, Nevelson worked with wood. She went to the streets and found wood on litter piles in New York City, took it back to her studio, and then reconfigured these objects into crates or boxes that she stacked into modular walls. She called these her wall works, and it reinvented sculpture at the time because no one was working in that way. Nevelson was one of the first sculptors to introduce illusionism into her work. She would take found objects and configure them in a crate and create really a work of art on its own in each box or crate. Nevelson unified the disparate wood pieces that she collected by painting her works monochromatic black, mostly, but also white and gold. And visitors will have an opportunity to see these various sculptures in the show. The title of the exhibition, The World Outside, comes from a phrase that Nevelson used herself to describe one of her earliest exhibitions where she used found wood and other found metal objects. Nevelson, during her lifetime, was so often described as creating an insular world or portrayed as a lonely genius alone in her studio working by herself. But in truth, Nevelson was very attuned to what was happening around her in the world, especially in the post-war era. The idea for the exhibition came from the Carter's collection, who since the 1960s has been interested in Nevelson's work, being one of the first museums to collect her Tamron prints, and then collecting sculptures from various phases of Nevelson's career, including an early 1930s plaster, which is rarely seen, another work from the 1940s that Nevelson created out of ceramics, and then one of her monumental wall works, Lunar Landscape, from the late 1950s. All of these objects together and studying them and seeing how innovative Nevelson was in each media inspired the creation of this exhibition. I thought it was also important to reclaim Nevelson's role in American art history. She was one of the first artists to pioneer site-specific installations, which are so popular today. and she's often been overlooked for that accomplishment. She also was radical and innovative in her printmaking, incorporating fabrics when few, if any, artists were doing that. The World Outside, Louise Nevelson at Midcentury, looks at how Nevelson wanted to create different ways for visitors to see and experience art, and most importantly, for viewers to have a deeper understanding of their surroundings. At this time, I think it's an important opportunity for us to revisit what Nevelson was thinking at Midcentury and how that can inspire us today. I hope that visitors will have an opportunity to understand how innovative Louise Nevelson was, especially at a time when few, if any, women artists were receiving support or recognition. In fact, few women artists were expected to be sculptors. Nevelson truly defied her generation and remained on a constant creative path until her death in 1988. She constantly created new modes of sculpture. She continued with her wall assemblages, but she created new ways of creating her sculptures and creating outdoor works that were inspiring to other artists and were important in the history of not only 20th century art, but 21st century art.